We're here on Gadigal land. So we're just going to take a moment to acknowledge the space and place that we're in. So just feel your body in this space, or wherever you are out there. Notice where you are. Yeah. So we can take a moment, we acknowledge that we're here on Gadigal land, where there's been deep practice in this place for thousands and thousands of years. And we come here to practice in harmony with all that there is. And we'd like to acknowledge the ongoing custodianship of this land, of the Gadigal people. And we practice here in harmony. So, Bodhidasa.
Chittamaya.
You've written a book.
I have written a book. But before I wrote the book, I'm going to show you.
Wait. We're going to do it the same. So, this is Bodhidasa's book. So it's called Approaching Enlightenment.
Yes.
A guide to...
A guidebook to Buddhist ritual. Approaching Enlightenment, yes. And before this book was written, you and many other people have done the course that the book was based on.
Yes.
Yeah, and it wasn't called that.
No, it wasn't, but we're calling it that now.
There we are. This is the name that we have it now.
Yes.
Approaching Enlightenment.
Yeah. And I wanted to actually start about kind of talking about the title of the book and wondering kind of where, you know, why for approaching enlightenment? What's this leading us towards?
Because you think of a book on ritual, it's going to have a sort of more esoteric title, you know.
Yeah.
We had a working title that was Beyond Magic, but they didn't like that. So the idea of approaching enlightenment, there's a wonderful play with the word approaching. I enjoy words. I obviously enjoy writing, but I love the way words can have multiple meanings. So approaching in this case can be the physical sense of moving towards something. You physically approach someone else. You physically approach an artwork. You physically approach a place. So that sense of movement and momentum towards is something that I wanted to establish in the book, and I think is present in ritual practice. This idea of moving closer towards something. But approach can also be an attitudinal, has an attitudinal meaning. So it means something that is on the inside. So approach as an outer journey, as in moving towards something physically. But there's an approach that can be a perspective, it can be a view, it can be a way of seeing. And I wanted to, in a way, challenge the way some people approach ritual, and particularly approach worship and approach that way of practice. So the book plays with the idea of physical movement and momentum, doing the work, doing the practice itself, but also looking at the inner attitude, the inner approach that you might have, whether it's a positive approach that you love ritual work, you love devotional practice, or whether you approach it more warily.
Yeah, because that's where it began, really, wasn't it? It was like, I remember the course originally, it was, and it still kind of is to an extent, aimed at people who really don't get ritual or feel that ritual's not for them in some way. And I think that that's a really interesting place to start the premise of a book on ritual, rather than it being rituals like, yay, ritual. It's like, oh, here's ritual, have a look at it and see what you think. Yeah, I'm interested in how it arose from that.
Yeah, I've done a lot of reflecting on where the origins of the book are, and there are sort of personal origins for the book, some of which are actually quite painful, and there's more intellectual reasons why I wrote the book, and then there's a more heartfelt response. So the heartfelt response I'll start with, and that is, for me, the ritual world connected with something that I was missing. And it was very profound and it was very special. And I just resonated in a way. It was like a coming home, the idea of this kind of work. And I was like, oh my God. And other people were like,
Yeah.
yeah. Or when we were on retreat and there was like, there's a puja coming, I would be like,
Ready.
bring it on.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I might read a book
Mm.
and stay in my room.
Yeah.
And some of my friends were just, they didn't get it. And it was like, why don't you get it?
Mm.
And they would say, well, no one's, it's just this extra thing.
Mm.
It's not really Dharma.
Mm. Mm.
It's not really Dharma
That's
at
an
all.
interesting idea, isn't it?
And I wanted them to enter into the space that I was feeling. I wanted to share it with them.
Mm.
And me going, wow, puja's amazing. Didn't actually achieve anything.
Yeah. Didn't explain anything to them.
It didn't make a bridge.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the emotional side of things. The intellectual side of things was when I looked at written material that existed around this field, it was all very definitional.
Mm.
It was all very much explaining things. And clearly it wasn't having the overall effect that I was having and that was present for people.
Mm.
So I wanted to decide to apply my training in literature and in history to use that so other people could understand, intellectually understand what was happening.
A way into something that maybe they didn't have before.
Yeah. And the more painful stuff, I won't go into much detail, but some people have said things about ritual to me that are just deeply painful. Just one that comes to mind, someone said to me that all ritual practice is a corruption of the true teaching. And I found that, well, I thought that's a very strong stance for that person to take. And I wondered if they had spent as much time with ritual as I had and other people I knew had, who I admire and respect. And I wonder if they'd had an opportunity to rest in that space before they had come to that conclusion. So I found that quite painful.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question around the title? And why I did
and
it?
how it's arisen. Yeah. I think just in terms of the content of the book, which people will get to later, it's I really invite everybody to have a read. It's very engaging. But one of the things that I really enjoyed the most, and I've talked to you about this before, my partner and I were reading it to each other at home, and we were both like,
that gave me such a thrill, the idea that, two people sitting there, they're like
reading it to each other.
History, but it's like, I didn't write it for that purpose.
No, but
it's so delightful to think that you would share this.
It's a very enjoyable book to read aloud.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. So, but just to get to my point.
Oh, sorry.
So the thing that I really loved about it is the way that you kind of weave in your own interests. And kind of take something, you take something that people wouldn't necessarily experience as very dharmic, and you come at it.
Oh.
Well, so my example is the Dorian Gray. There's a section in there where he talks about the Dorian Gray who kind of has this image painted of himself that degrades in the background, whereas he stays perfect and never degrades, but unfortunately isn't a very nice human being. Right, and it all comes out of the painting. But the thing that I really love about it is that you bring this in this kind of way as a challenge of like, hey everyone, actually, let's look at ourselves a bit more. Like, let's really look at who we are and how we are and what we're doing in the world. But the thing I love about that is that you bring in things that people wouldn't typically bring in to a Dharmic book. And I'm interested to know, what was that? Because it brought me really a lot of joy. But what was it for you that brought all of these different things in? Like, you bring in bits about magic, you bring in the magician, you bring in all these different Doctor Who, yes, did like that bit. Tell me more about where all of these inspirations came from and why they're in there.
So for me, it's about two words: about and into. So a book's about things. They stand at a distance and they look at and they comment on and they annotate and they express and they analyze and they sort of talk about. It's like you're sort of walking around something. Like you're walking around and looking at it from a distance, right? Whereas I'm more interested in the into. I want to go into the ritual. And the only way I can go into it is talk about my experience of being inside it by practicing inside it. And the thing about ritual is you have to bring all of yourself. You know, you have to bring the shadowy, dark parts. You have to bring the joyful, playful parts. You need to bring the parts that are thinking about other people. You need to bring the parts of yourself that just give you that little joy, right? If you decide you cut off parts of yourself and you say, this bit's not dharmic, I'm just going to push that away, you're engaging in a process of self-mortification. You're excising a part of yourself. And I don't want to do that. I spent a huge amount of my life, and maybe this is relevant for many of you, I spent a huge part of my life not being true to myself, but playing parts for other people because it was more convenient and happy for them, easier for them, for me not to be myself. And it's a long path towards saying, I am a Buddhist. I'm a Buddhist, I'm a gay man, and I'm also an utter nerd. Right?
Completely.
And all of these things are all part of who I am. And if there are parts of that that are not convenient for you, that's okay. You don't have to take them on. But I'm not going to be inauthentic. I'm going to speak my truth. And so I see that the Dharma isn't this rarefied thing that's only for Donne and Tchaikovsky and this kind of sources. It's not just Blake. I love Blake. But it's not just this high art. Dharma is about phenomena arising independent upon conditions. And that happens in Doctor Strange comics, right? That happens in Doctor Who. That happens wherever you are, not just in these rarefied worlds. And I wanted to say, you know what, that's great. I love that work. You know, I've got a degree in poetry. It's not that it's bad, but let's just realize it's also here too. And so I wanted to share those personal parts where I've had those insights through reading Ursula Le Guin or reading Mary Oliver or this kind of, and Picture of Dorian Gray.
And it makes it eminently readable.
Does it?
Yeah. I think that's one of the things. I feel like I'm getting a little slice of Bodhidasa as I'm reading the book as well.
It doesn't get in the way, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It's enjoyable to me.
So I would hate for the book to be some sort of weird biography.
It's not. It's not a weird biography at all. It's a very wonderful exploration of puja.
Is it?
As you meant it to be. Yeah.
Right.
And so getting to that bit. So getting to that bit about the fact that it's actually about puja.
Yes.
One of the other parts that I enjoy is that as you get to the end of each chapter, there's a real impetus to kind of do something practical.
Yes.
Like take it into account. And one of the ones that I did that was just like, I just kind of sat there and went, what am I doing? Is the bit where you're like, turn the page. Turn the page to the next thing. Okay, now turn it back. Like, and it just, I have to admit, I'm going to have to read it again because I can't in this moment tell you what it's about. But I really enjoyed that process of use this book as a tool to explore reality.
So what Chidamar is referring to is the chapter
on the magic bit, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the first chapter of the book is called "Is Buddhism a Form of Magic?" And it starts with a quote by someone who I was very surprised to read this quote from this person. Buddhists today, especially those from outside the old Buddhist world, have embarked on a long and difficult journey to discover the image of the Buddha within themselves and to allow that image a natural expression in their own cultures. This work is more akin to magic than to science. And that's from Subhuti. And what you're referring to is each chapter has a something to try section. So there's an activity that involves going on an excursion, like go to a temple, go to a Buddhist center. There's other ones, but the one you're referring to is about how to be a conjurer. And that is how to
conjure the next page.
How to realize that you are creating the reality in which you are sitting. So there's a whole step-by-step process where you can actually realize that the thing that you are holding in your hand and the way you are moving it It is occupying new spaces.
Yeah.
And moments are passing. Anyway, it's in the
Yeah,
book.
it's in the book.
It's in the book.
Read it.
I can't do it justice right now, but you found it.
I loved it.
You loved it. Why?
Yeah. Because it took me out of the usual experience of reading a book, which is the about in bit, right?
Right. Yeah.
So the book is out there. I am reading the book. It's external to me.
Yep.
Book reading. Whereas it changed it to, no, this is a process I am doing. It can't be happening without me engaging with it, which I really love that's how we do puja, right? Puja can't exist without us.
I'm so glad
engaging with puja.
I'm so glad you raised that because I was thinking, what has any of this got to do with ritual and puja?
Yeah, well, that's where we're getting to. Yeah.
Right. Because what you are, who you are, what you are doing, what you bring to the ritual is the most important thing in a ritual. A little bit of a spoiler, it's not this beautiful thing you see here that is the most essential aspect of any kind of Buddhist ritual practice. It's the attitude that you bring to it that is pivotal. And that idea of you being the conjurer, you being the magician, is realizing that you are putting in place certain conditions and being fully present to them. And then when you are present to them, you can be taught. You can learn what the ritual is trying to teach. And I hope that the activities are fun as well as reflective. And some will really be quite challenging, really challenging intellectually and probably emotionally.
Yeah, definitely. Not a book for the faint-hearted, but is.
No, it's not a book for the actually, it's not. It's not a nice little read. There are some, particularly the chapter on evil.
Yeah. That's the bit where Dorian Gray turns up.
Where Dorian Gray turns up. So the chapter on evil is called, where is it? How can I be better? Yeah. Because one of the things about ritual that people tend to forget is that it's not just, and maybe this isn't you, and maybe this is being a bit judgmental on my behalf. It isn't all about feeling anything. Doing a puja, performing a ritual practice of any kind, they can feel good. They can be enjoyable. They can be very pleasant. They can be very uplifting and very inspiring. And that's lovely. But there's so much more. There's such a deeper opportunity in them. And the Sevenfold Puja, or the seven-limbed prayer, condenses, I would say, the breadth of the Buddhist path. Yeah, you will find strong practice of morality in there and confession of faults. You will have to look at your own ethical failings. So morality is present inside puja.
Yeah.
So is joy in other people's growth and progress. So is generosity, doing things, giving just for the sake of giving. And that idea of orienting yourself towards that which is deeply inspiring and then letting go of any hope of reward. I mean, there's so much of the Buddhist path and practice that is embedded in a ritual. It's not just a series of words that we can repeat so that we can have the feels.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just bonus.
Oh, the feels are lovely. It's a cherry on top.
Yeah, cherry on top.
But it's not, you don't buy the sundae for the cherry.
No, that's true. I'm wondering if now would be a good time to open up to, or have you got another point?
Oh, I think if I read the little bit I was going to read out, it will take us down a mysterious rabbit hole.
And then we can do questions.
And then we can do, well, let's do questions first. Hey? How about that? See if that comes out.
Yep.
I'm going to write down the questions and then I'll prioritise the questions.
Oh, we were going to have somebody else prioritise the questions for you.
Oh, are they? I just thought you write them down because they really help. So we have questions from the room and questions from elsewhere. Is that correct?
Yes, possibly. So we'll open up to the room first. Is there anyone that would be interested in asking a question of Bodhidasa?
Don't be shy. There's no such thing as a bad question, just an inconsiderate answer.
Yep.
Hello.
Haven't read the book yet, obviously. What are some of the ideas in it that you're most proud of?
Can you say more about your question?
Or revelations, really.
Revelations?
Yeah, I think that's a better word. Through this process of writing the book, you felt sort of it's like revealing, like through it.
Revealing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the question was, what are the ideas that I'm most proud of and what are the revelations that have come? Yeah.
We put the question down or will you start?
I've just written that one down. I have a response to that. I might take them.
Just respond.
Oh, okay, fine. I'll respond. Can I respond by reading something? What I've come to learn, rather painfully as it turns out, is that when we pick and choose what fits our worldview, our way of seeing things, we affirm and adorn ourselves. We fix our identity. This is contrary to the core teaching of the Buddha, which states that we can know for ourselves that there is no fixed identity, and that in clinging to one, we will experience suffering. Okay. Our attitudes towards ritual will be informed by our understanding of who we think the Buddha was. Yeah. So for me, I think one of the great revelations was to realize that I hold to who I think the Buddha was. I define him in certain ways. And I know, and I haven't realized that other people define him in different ways and see him in different ways. And if I can understand how other people perceive the Buddha, do they see him as a social engineer? Do they see him as a godly figure? Do they see him as a political activist? Do they see him as a spiritual teacher? If I can understand how people see the Buddha and how they view him, that will then help me understand how they practice. And then it's an opportunity for empathy, rather than for me to say, no, I am right. This is who the Buddha was. This is how he taught. This is what he said. I'm just holding on, and there's no bridge and no connection. So that realization was really helpful for me. Now I understand why that person wanted to stay in their room and read a book rather than going to a puja. Now I understand, and I appreciate where they're coming from. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dane had a question, and then it looks like we've got someone online as well.
Okay, Dane. Hello, Dane.
Hello. Can rituals be dangerous if you do them wrong?
Can rituals be dangerous if you do them wrong?
Well,
There seems like there's a story there. Can rituals be dangerous if you do them wrong? What does do them wrong mean?
I don't know.
My response to that is an interesting one. Dangerous to whom?
Yourself.
Dangerous to yourself? I think anything that we do without full awareness and full knowledge has the potential to be dangerous. If you don't know why you're doing something and you don't understand the fundamentals of why you're doing something, you have the potential to have a very unclear view of the world itself. And I think that is particularly dangerous. I mean, the Buddha did argue in the Kalama Sutta that you shouldn't just do things because you're told to do them by somebody. You need to know, if you know for yourself that it leads to freedom from suffering, then you pursue it. So if you do a ritual, you just repeat things over and over again, I think it can become dangerous to your capacity to be open and receptive to what the ritual is really about. And in a sense, I think that's the great danger. Ignorance is the greatest danger in this sense. If you were thinking, is it dangerous, like, will I summon the devil? If that's where you were coming from. I don't know, I haven't tried.
don't try.
Just to give some real context to that, and it's in the book. Before I was a Buddhist, I was actually a ritual magician for 16 years. So I wasn't a Buddhist. I was I suppose your broad umbrella term would be pagan. And I have done a lot of ritual magic. Okay. A lot of the kind of bells and smells and the grinding of the stuff and the making of this and the calling on that deity and all that kind of, I've done a lot of that. And that's all I'm going to say about that. You can read more about that in the book.
You can read more about that in
the book, which is called Approaching Enlightenment, Not Approaching the Devil. Yeah.
So we've got 2 online and 1 from Usha. So let's go to online first.
We have Nick in Adistana.
Oh, hey Nick.
Nick asks, can puja be done at any time, anywhere?
Yes, I do it on the train.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I do that.
We also have.
Oh, can I finish my question?
Yeah.
I'll finish my answer to the question. So I don't mean I get up on the train.
Yeah.
Because there's really gross stuff on the floor. No, I actually spoke about this in the podcast that was done for the book. I recite the puja every day. I have 4 years, and I recite it in my mind while I am walking to the train. And I do usually the first half of the puja as I'm getting on the train. So what that means is I'll recite my precepts, the Dhammachari precepts, in my head to set me up for the day. I go on the train, I do my day, and then on the way home, I recite the ending parts of the puja in my head, and I reflect on where I did not succeed in following my aspirations, and I reflect on the people around me who I saw just being awesome. And I work in a school, and so I see kids doing awesome stuff all the time. In fact, I work in Australia's only Buddhist school. And so we celebrate positivity, we celebrate the good things kids do. So I reflect on that, and then usually by the end of the night, as I'm heading to bed, I'll finish in my head the ends of the puja. And the shortest puja that I've come across, do you want to hear it? Okay, it's got 7 lines, which take no time at all. Through prostration, offering, declaration, rejoicing, requesting to turn the Dharma wheel and not to enter into nirvana, whatever even minor virtuous action I have done, I dedicate all the merits towards full enlightenment. That are the 7 stages of the puja. Now, of course, you don't just say them and they'll have some sort of magical effect.
Yeah.
You have to kind of
Experience.
go into them and live through them. Yeah. I hope that answers your question, Nick.
All right.
I've got Helen Lam from our YouTube stream.
Helen Lam is my boss.
Hello,
Hello, Helen.
Helen, for a boss question. What way has your day job influenced your interpretations contained in your book?
My question back to you, Helen, is am I able to come back to work tomorrow? Yes, one of the aspects of the school where I work that's really important, and it is relevant for young people, is our school has a very strong emphasis on ethics, on morality, because we often are working with children who have really separated from their cultures in many ways, and separated from receiving guidance, and separated from knowing what are the right ways to be in the world. And that's not their family's fault necessarily, it's just cultural shift. And our school's focus is primarily around making skillful or unskillful choices, wholesome or unwholesome choices. And so that emphasis around ethics has been really significant, and it's helped me see the place of morality in the puja itself, in the 7-limb prayer, in the Sevenfold Puja. It's helped me see how significant that is as a point of transformation. And that if we don't stop and look at our actions of body, of speech, of mind, if we don't consider the consequences, if we don't consider the impacts of them on ourselves and others, then there is no hope of transformation. There is no hope of attaining Buddhahood. There is no hope of approaching enlightenment if you're shackled by the weights of your actions. Yeah. So you can't move forward if you are held back by the things that you have done, or not being willing to face them, in the case of Dorian Gray.
Not being willing to look.
Yeah, and so that for me has been the really useful part. And again, I'm hoping I can come to work again tomorrow, Helen. I hope that's the useful part.
She just says, don't be late.
Fabulous.
And it was very much a personal story about me encountering evil in the streets in a way that I hadn't really considered before. And when I wrote it, it was very painful to write. And the amazing editor, Dhammalega, I hope you're watching, she said, don't think we can leave this in. And I asked her why. And she said, there's a part of it that you really need to see how that's going to land with people of colour. And so she said, can you run it by people of colour? And there was absolutely no intention of myself, a great lover of the Pali as I am, to make any comment about that. And so she said, I'm sorry, it has to go. So I was left without a chapter. And it just so happens that the image in the book, actually there's an image in here, of the figure of Mahakala, which is not someone that we tend to write or talk about a lot in Triratna. There's a particular really terrifying image, which you can find on page 139, much better in colour. We actually have this, must sound weird, we have this in our bedroom. And I was just walking down into the bedroom and I saw it and I went, I saw it, it saw me, it was like a mirror. And I sat down and I wrote that chapter. So the chapter on Mahakala came out of something needing to be removed. And the chapter on Mahakala is all about how you look at the portrait that you hide in your attic. How do you look at that thing? How do you face up to yourself? Yeah. So that just came out of a very skillful piece of editorial
Feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Yes, of course. Thank you.
We've got another one online.
Josh Sawtell asks,
Hi, Josh. I used to work with Josh. He's also a dear friend. Hello, Josh.
does the art of play have any place in ritual?
Best question ever. Yeah.
Hang on.
Oh, of course he's got more. I know Josh. Yep.
So
Is there a link between what you've mentioned about magic and how a creative or playful mind, young or otherwise, would approach or perform ritual?
Play. Okay. Really?
say that question again.
Yeah. Can you say that question again for me, and I'll repeat it.
Does the, oh, well, you can hear me, please.
Yeah.
Does the art of play have any place in ritual? Is there a link between what you've mentioned about magic and how a creative or playful mind, young or otherwise, would approach or perform ritual?
This is a nice question to end on.
This is a great question to end on. I think we have to look at two sides of this. There is time for ritual to be repeated as it always has been. One of the definitions of ritual is that it's a repeated act. A ritual has to be a repeated act, and it is rooted in common strivings, embedded with shared values. That's one of the definitions of ritual that comes from the book. Though I didn't invent it, it came from Eric Fromm. So there's that side of things. You do the ritual, you repeat it, and it's the repetition, like the water drops eroding. Water drops will erode the ego, right? There's that side of things, and there is structure and form and regularity, but it doesn't have to be deathly. It doesn't have to be like a Puritan mass. You know, it doesn't have to be like that. It can be full of colour and shape and movement and artistry, like this shrine here. There's elements of artistry in shrine making. when I lead retreats based on the book, one of the things that we do is we write and create our own puja over the course of the retreat, where each participant writes parts in their own way and makes offerings in their own way, and we create the shrine in our own way. And so there is a sense of exploration and play, because one of the things that's really valuable in ritual is that it doesn't bind you, it releases you. It doesn't hold you to form and tradition rigidly, it holds that form and tradition gently, so that you can be authentically yourself, you can be free, you can play, and you can experiment. So it's a mixture of the two. There needs to be the form and the repetition, and that openness to experiment, to play, and to find your own authentic connection with what's being offered. Yeah. So I hope
Fabulous.
that answers that question, Josh. We will need to finish up because some of you might like to talk to Ratnajoti later and buy a copy of the book. And after that, after we have a little refreshment, what's happening?
We're going to have a puja. Unfortunately, won't be online.
No.
Sorry
But you
about
can do
that.
one.
But you can definitely do one in your own homes or
Yep.
wherever it is that you are. But yeah, we'll be coming back into the room to have a puja together.
It'll be a short puja,
Yep.
so a threefold puja. And I will talk about it beforehand so that you know exactly what's going to happen, and so no surprises.
So, shall we all thank Bodhidasa? Thank you, Mara.
Yes, not here, doing all our tech support. So thank you all for being online, and thank you to Windhorse also, and also to Bhante Sangarachana. For without him, I wouldn't be here. And the Buddha, of course, without him, none of us would have ever met.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Bye.
Well done.